Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. We're barely into the offseason, and yet we have a pretty busy episode here as we get into a lot of moves around the Orioles Major League coaching staff, some new hires under manager Craig Albertaz, and we're also going to break down the looming deadline for the Orioles to protect players from December's Rule 5 draft with a spot on the 40-man roster. They've already protected several key players, but we're going to look at who's left for them to possibly protect in this episode later on and break down which players might get called onto the 40-man before the deadline next week. But let's start off with the news of the Orioles coaching staff. With Craig Albertaz now at the helm, the Orioles are rounding out their coaching staff. And in the last week, they've reportedly hired 3 coaches with ties to Albertaz. That includes new first base coach Jason Bourgeois, a former teammate of Albertaz's in the Tampa Bay Rays system. Donnie Ecker, who previously was a coach with the Texas Rangers, offensive coordinator and bench coach before being let go last season, previously worked on the Giants coaching staff with Albertaz, who was also there with Dustin Lind. Lind has served as the Phillies assistant hitting coach for the last 2 years and will be the Orioles lead hitting coach this year. So Albertaz, Lind, and Ecker were all part of the Giants coaching staff a few years ago, while Bourgeois is a former teammate of Albertaz's. And this is kind of an interesting development that we've seen here in the last few weeks where we're getting a clearer sense of who's going to be on the coaching staff. A lot of ties to Craig Albertaz among the new hires, but we also learned just before coming on air that at least 3 coaches from last year's staff are set to come back. They are Buck Britton and Drew Frentz and Ryan Klimek. Britton was the interim third base coach for the Orioles after the firing of Brandon Hyde last year, and before that had been the major league coach. Frentz has been the pitching coach for the last 2 years, while Klimek has served as the director of pitching strategy for the last few seasons. Their roles are unconfirmed at this point in time, and in fact, the Orioles have not officially announced any of these hirings, but based on various media reports we have seen, it seems like things are coming together for the Orioles. Now, Nick, I'll start with you here, and let's start with the coaches that are coming into the organization. Some clear ties to Craig Albertaz, and there's really 2 different components we can go with this, which is, one, how much leeway does it show that the Orioles are willing to give Albertaz if they're bringing in 3 guys that have ties to him? And 2, what do you think these coaches can bring to the organization?
Sorry, I was making sure we're good on YouTube because that intro bombarded me. Like 2 different versions at the same time.
Oh, wow.
I think we're good on YouTube. Yeah, this is. I don't have a ton of thoughts about the new hires right now. I think it's good to see the names coming back that are coming back. I think a lot of those are guys we kind of talked about last week as being, it seemed like we're getting a little deeper into the offseason and no announcement yet on the pitching side. So it seemed like a lot of the pitching coaches are going to come back, and that looks like that's the case. So good to see that. And Buck Britton just kind of seems like a good bridge. And I don't want that to come off like disparaging at all, or like he's a bridge and then they toss him next year. But like, if there's one person you're going to keep on the staff, right, a guy who's known a lot of these guys since they were in the minors, has come up with them, I think he could be a good bridge for Albertaz to help like that initial connection thing, whatever. But as far as the new guys go, the Lind hiring, obviously success at a couple of stops already, some proven success. The biggest thing for me and my initial takeaway is that without knowing him fully and like his day-to-day teachings, I don't know if this represents like some mass overhaul of like the hitting development, hitting philosophy in the organization. It kind of seems like this is within the same mold of some previous hitting coaches we've seen before, and like self-taught guy. Yeah, he played college baseball. Ryan Fuller played college baseball and was an English teacher. And within 2 years was the Orioles hitting coach at the major league level. Lind, physical therapy background, the biomechanic background, kind of self-taught in that same way as far as hitting goes because of the wealth of knowledge out there and wealth of resources out there on the internet and the modern game. So I think it's more so with Lind. I almost wonder if this is just more like it's different messaging. Right? This team, like as we've talked about this a lot the last couple of weeks, how like this team wasn't chasing, but they're just not hitting anything in the zone. And so maybe with Lynn's biomechanical background, maybe it's different, a tweak in the approach, and maybe it's just like different messaging, a different voice, and that with it's a new season, hopefully an infusion of talent, new energy for Craig Albernaz himself, and hopefully all that combines and we see a better hitting team next year. But yeah, I just think this isn't. We got to see when the season starts the impact that Lynn's going to have. I think, but like I don't know. We'll see how much of an overhaul this truly is, and we'll see how many other hitting coaches come into how many assistants he brings. I know a lot of people I think are probably hoping that there are none and it's just him. I think it's okay if he brings in one and even two. I think that's perfectly fine. But yeah, as far as Lynn goes, it's interesting for sure though.
Yeah, seems like a just super smart guy, obviously on the young side. And yeah, I wouldn't imagine anything much more than tweaks. I didn't think we were going to be bringing in like a Chili Davis, going back old school with the teachings. I think it's always going to be the same lines that they're doing, just making tweaks and trying to figure out what's right. But Lynn seems like a really smart guy, and it's kind of weird they're bringing in a former closer to be the bench coach. No, wait, that was Donnie Ecker. So similar. I have heard of him before, so I know he's more offensive minded. He was a hitting coach or offensive coordinator with the Rangers. So I do like that they're bringing in guys, different voices. I wonder if John Mabry, being one of the guys that hasn't been announced if they're returning or not, if he could be one of the assistant hitting coaches, or if he could be somewhere on the staff, or if he's going to end up in Texas with Skip Schumacher and Jason Bourgeois. I remember him as a player. I think if it's who I'm thinking of, was he the Angels outfielder?
Played for a few different teams. Long career, was drafted by the Rangers in 2000 as a second rounder, and then played for several teams in the majors over 8 seasons after debuting in 2008.
Okay, but the name certainly rings a bell. I do remember fantasy baseball wise. Feeling bougie up in here. It's all I got for the coaches. I am happy that Buck Britton is coming back. I think, like you said, the familiarity with these players as they've been coming up, I think that's going to help. It's going to help Albernaz out a lot and just be a nice ear to lean on, voice to lean on. And who else is coming back? French, that makes a ton of sense. I like French a lot. I think the pitching, I think it was a lack of horses in 2025 more than a lack of like getting the most out of guys. So that makes a lot of sense for me. Interesting that Plasmeyer wasn't mentioned as coming back. Hopefully he stays in the organization, but Klimek will be back. That's good as well. He's been around for a few years now. So yeah, I'm certainly happy with all of the news surrounding the coaching staff so far this year. And obviously, like Nick said, we won't know until we really won't know ever, but we won't really know at all until spring training rolls around. You start seeing quotes and obviously the numbers will speak for themselves in the 2026 season, but I'm pretty hopeful for what we've seen so far.
I wanted to bring this up about Lind because I think of all the coaches that have been reported to be joining the Orioles staff in the last week or so, this is the one that draws the most intrigue because of all the things that Nick just mentioned and the fact that we know the Orioles offense needs some help. And even if it's not a shift in philosophy, at least a different voice kind of leading the charge here. I noted a piece that Andy Costco wrote at the Baltimore Banner a few days ago. He brought up the Phillies actually brought Lind in from the Giants a few years ago to work as an assistant under Kevin Long, in part to help cut down on the chase rate. And although the Phillies' chase rate last year was higher than the Orioles by about 3%, 30.3% compared to 27.5% for the Orioles, there were some crucial areas that they were much better in. Fewer strikeouts and more walks in the Orioles offense. And while they made hard contact at a similar rate, more success with the launch angle, skewing more towards skewing more towards line drives than fly balls. So there's one key area right there. Now, with that said, we also know the Phillies had a lot of proven veteran hitters in their lineup last year. And it's not an apples to apples comparison with the Orioles lineup, but at the same time, we know that these young hitters are capable of doing a lot more than they did last year. So maybe there are some subtle tweaks to the philosophy that the Orioles feel like Lynn can bring in.
Yeah, I don't think we know what these guys are capable of, a lot of these younger bats, and we have a good idea of what their potential could be. And it's just even with the stolen base stuff too, not just the hitting, but you talk about Bourgeois and he's going to work with guys on the stolen base side, and the outfield defense. Obviously, defensive metrics didn't love that group last season. Could be a good asset for Beavers and Cowser specifically, but like this team was 17th in stolen base success rate, I believe that's correct. This team could be better than that. Cowser can be better than that. Jackson Holiday can do better. Even Westberg, like this team can get to a better stolen base success rate there. Hopefully, Bourgeois helps in those areas. And you talk about just the messaging too, like with the Donnie Ecker hiring. I do like this one, and I went back and read because he was the 2021 MLB Coach of the Year when he was with the Giants. And I went back and read that article at Baseball America, and they talked about how like no one in that lineup really slumped. And like the stars were the stars of that lineup. Some of the guys who were coming off down years, like Yastrzemski, was a 35, 36-year-old Evan Longoria. These guys had bounce back years. And then this slew of like guys who were expected to be role players at best really stepped up and became big time contributors under Donnie Ecker's guidance there. But he talks a lot in that article, a lot of quotes from him about like, we led the league in players working on their mental health. We created spaces for people to be open and vulnerable and talk. Are you getting the guy who knows he's in a safe place? We had healthy individuals who knew they were supported. If support is low, the challenge can't be high. And then Buster Posey quoted as, talking about Ecker, saying that Ecker is the translator of here's all the data that the team behind the scenes are producing. Here's all this good, juicy information. Ecker was really good at translating that individually to the players themselves. And so all that combined really helped these guys really seem to spark something with the guys in that Giants lineup. So I think that kind of matches a lot what Craig Albertz has talked about. Quotes and stories we've heard from him in his past and some of the things he talked about in his initial press conference. So I think just a combination of all of this, new energy, new messaging. Let's hope it works.
Yeah, and that sounds great when you're talking about a bench coach who can also obviously has some thoughts on the hitting side as well if they need another voice in that regard. But yeah, we know that this is a talented group. We know we've been over it. If they're healthy, if they are available, I think they'll learn. And coaches obviously are. It's not team. You can have the same coaches for every team. It's going to be different results. It's so player dependent. But to be able to get the most out of these guys, hopefully, this group of coaches can figure that out.
Do you get it? Zach's frozen.
Oh,
Just to go back to a point that Nick made a second ago, I think that the Orioles have this reputation as a team that doesn't employ small ball at all. And I think a lot of that is earned. But at the same time, when you look at the players who can steal bases on this team, Gunnar was 30 for 35 in stolen base attempts last year. That was excellent. But then Jackson Holiday being 17 for 28, that's not very good. And we've seen in the past where he can be more efficient. And then Colton Cowser, I was surprised when I looked this up earlier. Lost a lot of time last year with injury, but 14 for 14 in stolen base attempts. So it seems like the Orioles want to leverage more out of the players they have. And that's before even looking at bringing in a leadoff hitter who can kind of table set for you. If they want to leverage the players they have, I think they can get more out of these guys.
Yeah, could definitely be more aggressive on the base paths, I think, especially when it comes to steals. And obviously, once Enrique Bradfield comes up, Beavers can steal 20, 30 bases. Judd Fabian, role player, will be able to steal some bases. Yeah, Gunnar, God, if Juan Soto can steal as many bases as he did, Gunnar could go 50 next year if he really wanted to. Cowser's got some speed. Westberg, yeah. I don't know what – someone needs to teach Holiday how to steal base because he's clearly fast enough. But yeah, just overall, I think aggressiveness on the bases would be nice, and just a little more solid defensively. And obviously, it's player dependent and situation dependent. But those are the things that they don't really show up when you're looking at the OPS of the lineup. But those things will help you win some games.
Yeah, I mean, it all sounds good so far, but it's November. It's the players have to take ownership as well. Like they need to be accountable in this entire thing, and it's at least positive stories so far from all these guys, and we'll see. It looks like the major, as far as the coaching staff changes, it seems like the major work of that is largely done. Maybe a couple of assistants here and there. We'll see if Plasmeyer comes back, like you mentioned earlier. His name is one that no one has brought up yet, if there's a replacement there. But I think for the most part, we've got the new staff here, and yeah, it's getting me more excited, I think, to this new energy. It seems like already. Forget the offseason talk. That's the same offseason talk every year. The Orioles being aggressive, big spenders. We'll see about that. But everything else, at least, it's positive vibes, I think, is how I'm viewing it so far going into 2026. But
nobody wants a Brexit, says Scott Boris.
We'll go over now to the Rule 5 draft. On November 18th, teams will have to make their decisions about which players to protect from the Major League phase of the Rule 5 draft by placing them on the 40-man roster. And as we get into this discussion, it's important to distinguish the Major League phase versus the minor league phase, because any player placed on the 40-man roster is protected from the Major League phase of the Rule 5 draft. But the list of players protected from the minor league phase is rarely made public, yet usually much longer. You include a lot of guys that aren't on the 40-man, but we've seen in the last few years where the Orioles will lose some depth in the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft. But as they gear up for the Major League phase of this year's Rule 5 draft, it feels like they've already made their biggest decisions. Dylan Beavers and Samuel Basayo were at the top of the class among the first-time Rule 5 eligible players this offseason. They were both added to the 40-man when they were promoted to the major leagues in August. Meanwhile, last week, the Orioles added reliever Anthony Nunez to the 40-man roster as part of a series of moves that took place. Nunez was a prospect acquired from the Mets as part of the Cedric Mullins trade in July. He put up very good numbers last season between the Mets and Orioles systems. And had he stuck with the Mets, he probably would have been protected from the Rule 5 draft given the pace that he was on, but he came over to the Orioles. It looked like all he had to do is just kind of put the finishing ties on his strong 2025 season to be protected by the Orioles, and that turns out to be the case. With all of those moves last week, the Orioles' 40-man roster is at exactly 40 players. However, we know that there are ways that the Orioles can make moves between now and next week to protect some additional players if they choose to do so. So what we're going to do in this episode is kind of look at who is out there that could be protected and figure out how likely it is that the Orioles are going to make room for them on the 40-man. And the list of players who are Rule 5 eligible this offseason is pretty long, covers a full spectrum of guys. You have 4 catchers, a few infielders, a few outfielders, and as always, a lot of pitchers. But realistically, the list of players that are going to be protected from the major league phase of the Rule 5 draft, maybe 4 or 5 candidates left at this point. So we'll break some of them down tonight. And Nick, I'll start with you here. It does feel, as I said, like the Orioles have made a lot of big decisions. And with that in mind, do you think that there is a possibility that they don't add anybody else before next week? Or are there still some names you think they're going to try to protect?
I actually hadn't thought about that until as you were doing the intro there for this segment, I thought about that. I was like, what if this is it? And there is nobody else. I think honestly that could be a possibility. Like we'll talk about specific players here. And I have some thoughts about some that I would like to see and some that I think a lot of people might consider locks that I think I'm gonna take a contrarian route tonight on a couple guys. But yeah, I think there's a possibility that this could be it. When you look at the Rule 5 draft, like it's what 10 picks, 15 picks have been made the last couple of years on the major league side. It's not super active process, I feel like, as much anymore. And I don't know. When you look at these guys, I think there are valid reasons why you would take the gamble and like not protect them. And I think they would still have a very high rate of not being picked, or even if they do get picked, some of these guys would very likely be returned. Juan Nunez last year with the Padres. But yeah, I don't know. I think that is a pretty solid point because Anthony Nunez was one of my like locks for sure. Like I thought that was like first and foremost number one. Love the backstory. The drafted out of high school by the Padres as a hitter, didn't work out. Couple years in the pros, goes back to college, and he couldn't go D1 at the time, so he goes D2, starts pitching down there. 2025 was his first full year as a pitcher, and he pitched across 3 different levels, reached AAA. The pitch metrics are awesome. That slider and changeup, 2+ offerings, like just dominant all year. So I think he makes an impact in the big leagues at some point in 2026. But as far as these other guys, yeah, you look at the 40-man roster, I can see 1 or 2 kind of easy decisions in my mind of guys who could go. And you saw them over the last couple of weeks. You saw the Orioles kind of give maybe little bumps to financially in this specific situation if they need to be DFA'd in hopes of if they clear waivers, then they will accept that assignment to AAA and get removed from the 40-man roster with a little pay bump so they don't forfeit their salary. So I think you could easily find like at least 2 spots on this 40-man roster right now. But yeah, it'd be interesting if it's just Nunez.
That would be wild. I don't think it's out of the question, but I am happy that they got Nunez out of the way early. I mean, he definitely deserved it. He was going to be a lock for me. Just electric arm, and honestly, I think he's a guy that could be, if they need someone to stretch out in a couple years, I think he's got the mix to potentially be able to do it down the line if necessary. Hopefully it's not necessary, and I don't think it will be, but he's got a nice pitch mix. Obviously the sliders stand out, but just a really, really good arsenal overall. I think there will be more than him though, because I'm looking at the 40-man right now. Pedro Leon, who they just picked up off of waivers, is a potential guy. Ryan Noda, Luis Vasquez on the infield. Pitchers, George Soriano, and there was one more, Jose Espada. I think these guys could clear waivers or be DFA'd. And obviously Ryan Mountcastle, I think we expect to be non-tendered, but I think that deadline's a little bit later in the month. I personally think Cameron Weston is the next one closest to a lock. I just think he's kind of in the Brandon Young situation where he's right there. He's ready to go if you need him in the bullpen. Spot starter. He's available to do so. I think Judd Fabian I would protect. And on the relievers, Carter Baumler, certainly an option. Cameron Foster, certainly an option. I think Ramon Gomez, even though he hadn't pitched since we traded for him, he can throw like 110 miles an hour. So he's going to be protected, in my opinion. And I think Alex Pham is a sleeper just because after seeing his stuff plus numbers in AAA, it was a lot better than I expected. So it could be as many as 5 or as few as maybe just 1 or 2 more.
Let's go ahead, Nick.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, let's start with Weston because I think that's a pitcher that has a kind of an interesting case. The most compelling argument for protecting him is that of your Rule 5 eligible pitchers, he's the most immediate starting rotation depth option. He led all Orioles minor leaguers in innings pitched last year. He's been very durable over the last 2 years. What's interesting about his case, and this is where I think some people would nitpick with Weston, he is not a premium velocity guy. Fastball was about 91 miles, sat about 91 miles per hour at Norfolk last year. Where he tends to get by is with a broad pitch mix with multiple pitches that he can throw for strikes at any given point. He got off to a little bit of a slow start at AAA, but kind of leveled off and put together what I would say is a very solid season there. And the Orioles would be lucky to have him around as starting pitching depth going into next year. But this is where it's always difficult for me as a Rule 5 draft is that you don't know who other teams are not going to protect. And it feels like there's always this handful of starters left out by organizations like the Rays or the Guardians, who maybe 2 years ago were on track to put up, to be in the major leagues by now, only to get sidetracked by injuries, or guys that don't have the command or the polish that Weston does with his pitch mix, but they throw a lot harder. So that's where Weston's case is a little bit tough, but I think that you could go either way with it. So, Nick, I'll start with you. Where do you see Weston fitting into this discussion?
Yeah, I do kind of. It would be kind of cool almost if it was just like a rolling. You have a hard deadline, but teams just start announcing a little bit earlier, and you can kind of get sneak peeks at protection lists and who's going to be available. But maybe that would change your mind about the Orioles, who we know would be the very last team to announce theirs if that was the case. But I'm going to say for tonight's exercise that I do have three guys addition to Nunez that I'm protecting, and Cameron Weston is one of them. I just think if you look at the numbers, like the raw stats, like nothing's gonna pop off the page. And even if you look at his stuff, I don't think anything really pops off the page. Like you mentioned, is he only sat 91 miles per hour, but it's like 6 or 7 pitches. I feel like the few interviews that he's done, Jesus, I shouldn't have gone there. But it's like everything. Lost my train of thought already. Every interview, he hasn't done very many interviews, but every interview he's done, it always seems like he's added another pitch. It's like now he's up to whatever. But they're all like average to above average offerings across the board, and I think it's that unique delivery. It seems like he's lowered his release point, I think, year after year, the last couple of years too. But it's that unique delivery, unique release traits, I think, that are big positives, and AAA hitters could not square him up. 92nd percentile in average exit velocity allowed, 82nd percentile in barrel rate allowed, and 96th percentile in hard hit rate allowed. So I think those are fantastic. And yeah, like you mentioned, if you keep him in AAA, I think he's great starter depth for you. If you have an emergency next year, this is a guy who can go out and give you 5, 6+ innings. But also, like I've said before, during the regular season this year, I think there's a path for him to be successful in the big leagues as a reliever. Like imagine a big, tall, like Kyle Bradish guy who's got that high release. He's throwing rising fastballs up in the zone. And then you bring in Cameron Weston behind him, who's got the much lower release, completely different pitch mix. It's going to take hitters an inning or two to adjust to him. And if it's just an inning or two in like a shorter reliever type role, I think he can be successful there. So yeah, I protect him and I give him a shot.
Yeah, even though the lower velocity, I think Baseball America has him with like one of the best sinkers in all of the minor leagues last year. So clearly something is working there. And I think everything kind of works off of that. I almost feel like he probably has too many pitches that are kind of a little too similar. I feel like he's kind of really underrated in the system right now because I think he's only a few tweaks away from being like what we potentially thought Kyle Brnovich could be at one point in his career, a little bit closer to when he was traded for in the Dylan Bundy deal, but just a guy that, yeah, he could be a really safe back of the rotation arm if you need him, or he could convert to relief and, sinker changeup or sinker splitter, whatever. Get Devin Williams in here and they can teach each other new changeups and airbenders. So yeah, I really think Weston is underrated, even just because the numbers aren't fantastic, but man, he threw a lot of innings. He got a lot of experience. And I just feel like if he can get the command back to where it was the year before, and maybe it never really left, maybe it is just the umpires, the smaller zone and all that played in effect. But if he can kind of combine 2024 and 2025, I think you have a really, really solid, what is the saying? Swiss Army knife of a of a pitcher that you can use in pretty much any situation.
Yeah, as I sit here and think about it, I really do feel like there's value in protecting Weston because you have that immediate starting pitching option on your 40-man roster already. You need an extra starter for a doubleheader. You need someone to come up and fill in for 2 or 3 starts while somebody has a short-term IL stint. Weston's a guy who can do that. And I also think that there is a possibility you could really build him up as a bulk reliever for all the reasons that Nick mentioned. I want to shift over to a position player, though. And Bob, it's someone you just mentioned a moment ago, and that's Judd Fabian. And if we had gone back to about June 1st and we were having this conversation about Judd Fabian, I think we would have seen it as a foregone conclusion that he was going to be protected because having a pretty good year for Norfolk up to that point, we all know what the tools are with Judd Fabian. There are positives. It's the power, it's the ability to draw walks, and it's the ability to play an excellent defensive center field with a very good arm to go with good range out there. What happened, though, is that Fabian went on the IL in late June with a wrist injury. He came back about a month later and was not the same hitter after that. Numbers really came off a cliff. And when you see Fabian struggle as much as he did over the last 2 months of the season, the flaws with the bat, specifically the very inconsistent hit tool and the swing and miss tendencies, become a lot more glaring. And the Orioles also have a good amount of outfield depth on their 40-man roster right now, with more on the way, possibly an Enrique Bradfield Jr., who's going to be at Norfolk next year. So Fabian, to me, there was a world where Fabian would have already made his major league debut if he had stayed healthy. But that didn't happen. He struggled when he came off the IL. And now we're sitting here about a week before the deadline talking about this. So, Bob, what do you see with Fabian at this point? Is the argument for protecting him stronger than the argument for letting him off the 40-man and hoping that a team doesn't pick him up?
Yeah, I think the argument is there to protect him. I'm protecting him. I do think that the struggles were injury related, and I know what they had their first child as well, so no sleep for sure. But I think going over it earlier, closer to the end of the regular season, I noticed that he just was swinging less in general after coming back from that wrist injury, so probably still babying it a little bit. I think the BABIP was low too. I just think, honestly, the defense alone and being like that close to Major League ready is enough for me to protect him because the defense is really good. And that's kind of invaluable. I think fourth, fifth outfielder with that kind of defense, that kind of pop. And then obviously you're still hoping that he can develop a better hit tool. I think he's close to a lock, but I do think he could be a guy that gets selected if he is unprotected, just because, I mean, if he's only needed as a fourth, fifth outfielder, we've seen it with the Orioles teams in the past. That's a pretty good spot to hold on to someone all year round. Anthony Santander, Joey Ricard, the list goes on and on. But yeah, I would protect him for defense alone. I do think that the offense was injury related, and we'll certainly find out, I think, in the first half of 2026 if that was the case or not.
I'm going to take the contrarian approach here and say Fabian doesn't get protected. And you look at his AAA, he's got 2 AAA stints, and you look at 2025, he did cut the chase a little bit, and it was, which is already very good. He does not chase. His contact on pitches out of the zone when he does chase went up. It's up to 40%. Overall contact rate improved. End zone contact rate improved. He was still first or second percentile on contact, but still it improved. And I do think it is, the injury is valid. And so he missed a month, and yeah, when he comes back, yeah, he maybe not been the same hitter, but he's just so boom or bust, right? He is that 3 true outcome guy. And I think if you're banking on the speed and defense as the fourth outfielder, it is tough because you don't want to lose him for nothing. You wanted him in the 2021 draft. You wanted him then. The Red Sox swoop in and take him. And then Judd says, screw you guys, I'm not signing with you. Goes back to Florida. The Orioles got more aggressive the next year and got their guy. So, I mean, this guy, the prospect pedigree that goes back to college is high and strong. Everybody knows who this kid is and scouted him in college. I don't know. The speed and defense, like you did just sign Leody Tavares for his speed and defense, that outfield depth role. I tend to believe the front office when they say, I think if they can get that impact center field bat, I think they do it. And Byron Buxton did today say that he might be willing to waive his no trade clause officially. I think it's tough. I think you risk it. Like, yeah, you hope Bradfield can have a strong 2026. I will continue to pound the table that Austin O'Verne, who also brings elite speed and defense, walks a ton. He has much more to tap into. he may not have the greatest hit tool, but I think it's at least a full grade higher than Fabian's. You don't want to lose Fabian for nothing, but I think I'm okay with like taking that risk and not protecting him.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards your argument, Nick. And one thing that came to mind when I was like trying to break down Fabian's case is there a way that the Orioles can make a deal before the Rule 5 draft that includes Fabian? So, yeah, is he possibly a throw in to a trade, or is he a guy that you're not going to build a package around, but someone who can make it a little bit more enticing for a team? With that said, I think that Bob brings up a valid point, which is that center field defense could draw somebody's interest. The question would be at that rate, are you comfortable with a guy who's probably not? I mean, if you had to take an objective projection right now of Judd Fabian in the major leagues next year over a full season, probably hitting under 200, right? High strikeout rate. How many teams are willing to live with that for the center field defense? There probably are some that would.
The Rockies need a replacement for Brenton Doyle when we trade for him.
It's a fair point. So
And
it's a really tough case.
I mean, yeah, you talk about like, you know, Enrique Bradfield Jr., we know what type of player he is. Leody Tavares, even if you get a little bit more out of the bat, you still know what type of player he is. The separator with Fabian with all those guys is like that power is legit. Like that's nothing to sneeze at. He might hit below 200, but how many home runs is he going to hit in the big leagues across the full season, even just next year? He's double digits easily. He could be a 15 plus home run guy in that first year. So I look, he is a guy who I want him in this organization because that late inning, if you're down a run, in the ninth inning, and you bring him in for that defensive replacement, you know what he's going to bring. That the arm is great too. We haven't even mentioned the arm yet. He piled up the outfield assists when he was down there in AAA this year. The arm is strong. The arm is accurate. That's going to be a big asset. And that power, like, yeah, it's a toss up whether he's going to make contact or not. But when he does, like, he hits the ball hard, and the chances of him just hitting a piss missile to tie that game in the ninth inning or take the lead in the ninth inning, it's very real. Kind of talking myself both ways here. It's a tough one, but my gut says they do protect him because I think this organization has been big believers in Fabian for a very long time, for like half a decade plus now. But I think for the sake of tonight, I'm gonna lean towards they don't.
Let's go over now. We got a couple of relievers we want to break down. I want to start with Cameron Foster, though. Foster was acquired in the other trade with the Mets at the trade deadline. That one saw him and Wellington Aracena come over to the Orioles in exchange for Gregory Soto. Foster spent most of 2025 before the trade at Double-A Binghamton, but we had some pitch data from a very brief stint that he had in Triple-A with the Mets before the deal, and the pitch mix looked interesting over a very small sample size. The Orioles get him, put him in Norfolk, and over a small sample size, he delivered pretty strong numbers while throwing a fastball that sat 95 miles per hour, mixing in a cutter that was pretty effective for him. And at 27 years old, he has to be a guy that you would think is close to Major League ready next year. So we saw the Orioles already go out and protect Nunez. I don't think Foster had as clear a cut of a case as Nunez at the time of the trade deadline, but he certainly built one up during his time with Norfolk. And if the Orioles want to add another optionable reliever to their 40-man roster, Foster would seem to be a good in-house candidate. So, Nick, I'll go back to you here. What do you see happening with Foster?
This is my number 2 guy that I'm protecting. I like him a lot. I think, I don't know, his ceiling maybe not be as high as Nunez. He may not be as impactful as an arm, but like 6'5", 230. You knew he was Rule 5 eligible when you traded for him, and he pitched well when he was in Norfolk. So I think he did everything he could to make his case. You mentioned the fastball there. Yeah, he's sitting 95, 96 with 18 inches of induced vertical break and 7 feet of extension. The cutter had a 49% whiff rate in AAA. Curveball, just a 97 stuff plus, but that got a 43% whiff rate in AAA this year. And then his sliders is 4th most used offering, that at 104 stuff plus. Not a lot of whiff, but like hitters didn't have great results against the pitch either. So I like the mix. I like his size. I protect him, and I'm going to give him a shot. And maybe that's one of the guys that you protect him and then maybe try to DFA him and sneak him through afterwards. But yeah, I don't know. I got a soft spot for Cameron Foster. I don't know what it is. It's been since the trade. He's just going to be a guy that I'll sit here and pound the table for.
Foster, Australian for beer. Remember those commercials?
Yeah.
I like him a lot too. I just think there's a few other options relief wise that I like a little bit better to protect. But I think I do not think he's going to get protected, is my official guess. But if he doesn't get selected in the Rule 5 and he's still in the organization next year, I definitely think he'll make his debut with the Orioles at some point and probably do pretty well. I put him in a similar category to Keegan Gillis as far as just big righties who can pump the gas and get some outs out of a major league bullpen when all is said and done. But there's just a few other guys that I think I would have ahead of him. But yeah, I do like him.
Yeah, the case between Foster and Gillis is an interesting one. I lean a little bit more towards Foster at this point because I just like the AAA results better. I point out before, though, that Gillis, you can't rely on the ERA a whole lot to tell you the story because, like a lot of relievers that had surface level numbers at Norfolk that weren't very good last year, a lot of that was influenced by a stretch of 2 or 3 bad outings at one point that happened during the season, and otherwise pretty good results. At this point, I think I like Foster's pitch mix a little bit better than Gillis's. So that's kind of why I lean towards him. But I don't think that there's a significant gap between the two stuff-wise.
I have a hard time getting over the fact that he was as dominant as he was in AA for as long as he was, and the organization still didn't move him up. I don't know. He did you look at his overall AAA numbers, not good, but if you break it down, it took a few outings, and then once he settled in, he really settled in and pitched well. I agree. I think between those two guys, I like Foster's stuff a little bit better as well. And again, it's hard getting over this belief that I don't think the organization is as high on Gillis as maybe some of the other guys, but I could be wrong there. I don't know.
No, I'm unanimous. I would have Foster ranked ahead of Gillis if we were doing reliever rankings.
Speaking of relievers, let's talk about Carter Baumler, who came on strong at the lower levels of the system, primarily high A and double A, to make a case for himself to be protected. And part of it with Baumler might be that the Orioles, for the first time in his professional career, are seeing flashes of why they were so high on him back in 2020 when they drafted him in the 5th round and got him to agree to an overslot deal to come into pro ball and forego his commitment to TCU. After that, though, it was a struggle for Baumler to stay on the mound. He didn't make his debut until 2022 because of Tommy John surgery, and then struggled to stay on the mound over the next 3 seasons. 2025 really represented what was close to the first full healthy season of his career, and he put up very strong numbers, primarily between Aberdeen and Chesapeake last season. And we don't have really good publicly available pitch data from high A and double A. So we can't break down Baumler the same way we just did Foster or Weston. But from what we could see on the broadcast during his time with Chesapeake, it seemed like the fastball was pretty consistently mid to upper 90s. He's always had a great curveball. That was on display last year. And given his injury history, it does seem like at this point he is strictly a relief prospect. I think they've kind of turned the page on him being a starter. So you're looking at a guy that's not going to be major league ready right out of the gate next year. Might have a borderline case for getting to AAA, but someone who, if he can build off of last year, could conceivably see major league time by the end of next season. So, Bob, I'll start with you here because Baumler going on to have a major league career of any sort at this point would be a great story given the injury struggles that he's had. And you want that to be with the Orioles if it's going to happen. But was last year enough for the Orioles to decide to put him over some seemingly other worthy candidates to put on the 40-man roster now?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think Carter Baumler is basically Azura High reborn. He's rewriting the script of Hunter Harvey of, starting pitching prospect out of high school with pretty awesome stuff, but can't stay healthy, come back as a reliever and shove. And I think that's what we're seeing. This was a tough call. I don't know if they're going to protect him, but I think he's right on the edge for me. I'll say they leave him off just because he's a little bit too far away, and hopefully a team isn't able to take him and keep him on the roster all year. But he certainly made a case for himself to be added, that's for sure. And he's got the stuff and the pedigree, I guess, to do so, to be added to the 40-man. I think, yeah, if he can build on this year, next year, I think he'll be one to watch. I think people will be excited for him to get his major league debut at some point.
Yeah, I think he's my third that I'm going to protect. So I've got Cameron Weston, Cameron Foster, and Carter Baumler. We got the CCC going on here. Old FDR. I have another one that I'm on the fence on, another pitcher we'll talk about in a moment, but I don't know. Baumler, just like, the stuff was never the question. It's just the injuries, like you mentioned. And when he doesn't pitch for basically 2 years, because his senior year of high school was COVID year, and he was up 49 total innings in his first 4 years as a pro. That's it. And then even in 2025, he got the late start because I had to go back and make sure it wasn't a shoulder or elbow, though. That was the reason for the delayed start in 2025. It was his back. So I don't know if that's good news because it wasn't elbow or shoulder, or bad news because we've added another ailment to his body. But I think he touched like 98 this year. The velo is back better than ever. He's got the knuckle curve, like you mentioned. He's got the slider. Apparently, he has a tumbleweed pitch that he learned from Kyle Bronovich. It's like a knuckle curve, morphin time splitter thing. I don't know. It's like a bunch of pitches morphed into one. I don't know. The guys just make up the weirdest names and just do crazy shit with pitches now. I feel like, and just like give it a cool name. I like the name, the tumbleweed. It's very descriptive of what it does. So, I kind of view it as like, put him on the 40-man roster, fast track him, start him in Norfolk. If he has a good spring, if he's feeling healthy and he has a good spring, just start him in Norfolk and see what happens. And bring him up for a net. When you need a reliever, you say, hey, all right, we need you for like a day. We need a guy for a day. We could bring up somebody who we just picked off the waiver wire, and then we're going to immediately DFA him, and that whole churn and burn with those types of guys. Give Baumler a shot in June or July for that one outing. And if he does well and you like what you see, great. Like Zach says, be a fantastic story. And if it's not working out too well in AAA, if the injuries start again, or he comes up to the big leagues and you're just like, this isn't it, then you DFA him, and maybe you sneak him through and he's minor league relief depth at that point. But I don't know, maybe it's more of a soft spot just because he's been around since 2020 and the stuff has never been in question. But I say protect him, fast track him, and let's see what he's got.
So it'd be Kowser, Westberg, Mayo, Baumler. Decent draft.
Decent draft.
Cool. Yeah. Be really good. Not to mention Brandon Young, undrafted free agent that year. So strong haul in 2020. But
don't forget TT Bowens still hanging around.
Yeah, definitely can't forget him. This is where I feel like personal preference and prediction are the hardest to separate, because I really want them to protect Baumler. Just because of all the guys that could possibly go on to have success somewhere else. All of them would sting to a certain degree, but that's the one that would really sting, because it's like you waited for him to be healthy, and then he was healthy, and then you let him slip away for nothing. Like, that would hurt a little bit.
It really does.
That said, though, where I'm kind of having a difficult time is, as I mentioned earlier, we don't know who other teams are going to leave off, and is a reliever with no experience above AA going to get a lot of traction among other teams. And that's where it's difficult. Like, I have a higher degree of confidence that if left unprotected, Cameron Foster would be chosen than I do the Carter Baumler would be chosen by another team if he were left unprotected. Then again, we saw the Padres last year with Juan Nunez. take him in the Rule 5 draft despite missing most of the prior season with an injury. So if a team likes a guy enough, they will do it, but we just don't know if there's that match out there like there was for Nunez with the Padres.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the reasons why you wouldn't protect Ballmer are a lot of the same reasons why I'm saying no. To move on to another player, I guess, to mix this in here, why I'm saying no to Ramon Gomez. But yeah, I think that again, that's the personal preference, the bias come in. I just sat here and be like, stop putting all the new guys in your fake trade dip proposals, and I'm over here saying let's just not protect the new guys in the Rule 5 process. But yeah, with Ballmer, it's that fastball's up to 98. Like he's got the loud stuff. That's what you want to look for with these Rule 5 guys who can contribute. I'm looking for the guys with the loud stuff or the super loud tool that maybe I can harness something and this can work out. And like I will say, Ramon Gomez, like, yeah, you throw 104, 105 miles per hour, like that's loud stuff. It's just we didn't even get to see him pitch after the trade deadline. He went on the IL and we never saw him, and he hasn't pitched above high A. So Ballmer at least got the double A, but Gomez not even above high A, but also like after the trade deadline, bring up that Baseball America article they put out this year, the research that they showed, pitchers who throw as hard as Ramon Gomez, they get to the major leagues. Like that's without a doubt. They get to the major leagues. Do they have success? That's a different question, but they're going to get shot after shot after shot after shot in the big leagues. And if it's what, 25, was it $50,000 to make a Rule 5 draft pick? I could see why you would protect Ramon Gomez just for that reason alone, where somebody I feel like would be willing to put up 50 grand to take a shot and say, if we can just unlock a little bit of control, we got a guy who throws 105 freaking miles an hour.
Yeah, I need to see someone hit 105 in an Orioles uniform at the major league level. So, Ramon Gomez, you are on the 40-man roster. Obviously, this is assuming they know his injury and how severe it is and how much it'll affect him and all that. So, if he's going to be good to go for 2026, talk about fast track. I'm like, if you can throw 103 to 105, start him in Double A, even though he obviously never even pitched that high, but he's not that young either. So this could be the next Felix Bautista story where we're able to rein in this fireballer and could have a future closer on your hands, or at least a future fun to watch relief pitcher in the major leagues out of the bullpen.
We just talked about Carter Ballmer missing a lot of time a moment ago. Look at Ramon Gomez the last 3 years. 7 innings with Brooklyn in 2023, out all of 2024. Gets 35 innings in last year, so he's effectively healthy for half the season, and then doesn't pitch at all after the Mullins trade because he has a back injury, never takes the mound for Aberdeen. If he had been healthy, I think we'd have a much clearer understanding of A, what the Orioles have, and B, what the likelihood of him being protected is. Because if the numbers had not been very good at Aberdeen and you could have looked and it's like, oh, he walks almost 7 batters per 9 innings, ERA in the high 4s, low 5s. I don't know how many teams would have been tempted by that out of high A, but the injury does add kind of a mystery factor where if the Orioles leave him unprotected, I'm inclined to believe that the injury is bad, or they just are not convinced that he's going to harness his control anytime soon. But if he does, you're both right. This is someone who could be fast tracked from high A or double A at the start of the next minor league season to the big leagues by the end of the year.
Yeah, it's such a small window. Like, yeah, we don't know what's up with the injury. A team is going to have to bring him in. And yeah, you've got all off season to evaluate and everything, but you got to hit spring training. You got to hit the ground running. And I feel like a lot of people would be like, well, a bad team like the Rockies or whoever, the Marlins, they could stash a guy like that in the back end of their bullpen. I don't think it's as that simple and that easy. So I feel like he still would have to come into spring training, throw a lot of strikes, and show real promise like immediately. Or I think there's real potential like he gets returned. So
Yeah, just the way pitchers are used these days, I feel like there's really not that spot at the end of the bullpen where you can just pitch someone once or twice a week and hide them. It's just a lot harder these days.
And before we go to a question from Vivek and then we wrap things up, so I just want to bring up a couple of dark horse players that we didn't cover tonight that kind of have interesting profiles in their own ways. Creed Willems coming off a really nice year at Double A Chesapeake. He's Rule 5 eligible for the first time this year. You look at him, and then you've got a few pitchers in the mix. Yaki Rivera had a very nice year out of Chesapeake's bullpen. Carlos Tavera, we've talked about numerous times over the years. Just when we're ready to quit him, he'll do something that's really impressive to remind you why he's got such interesting stuff. Trace Bright had a really rough first half at Double A, but rebounded a little bit towards the end of the year. Still an interesting pitch mix with him. And then, Bob, you just mentioned Alex Pham. Pham missed a lot of the season with an injury, but when he came back, looked pretty effective at Norfolk. So there are some under the radar names in there that we didn't devote as much time to tonight, but that I think are still interesting prospects nonetheless. Do any of those players seem like dark horse candidates to be protected or chosen by another team to you guys?
Fam's my dark horse to be protected. And who was the one? Oh, the one I think is a dark horse to get picked is going to be Reed Trimble, who we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah, Creed. I've seen. I posted the photo there of the spreadsheet I had of all the Rule 5 eligible guys, and I saw some comments to that. People saying who they would protect, and some people had Creed, and I don't see any reason to protect Creed. I think there's a 0% chance he gets picked and sticks on a major league roster in 2026. Not to bash him as a prospect or his prospect status. We could sit here for 15 minutes and talk about all the good things he's done. And but yeah, just no reason to protect Creed. Some of the other names, Trace Bright, I will say, yeah, you talk about the first half or second half. I think I brought this up in the Double A wrap-up episode, but just to bring this up again as maybe a dark horse, like if you want real dark horse, Trace Bright, maybe. I could see a world where it happens. As a starter last year, 56 innings, a 5.4 ERA, 4.83 FIP, just a 19% strikeout rate, a 16% walk rate. As a reliever, 26 innings, a 3.37 ERA, 2.58 FIP, 28% strikeout rate, and a 13% walk rate. If you think you really found something in him as a reliever, maybe. I don't think he gets protected at all. But if we're just throwing out like a super dark horse, I don't know. There were 2 distinct seasons from Trace Bright, so that could be an interesting one. So see if there's anything. Yeah, Yaki Rivera, he's not going to be protected, but no. I swear to God, you better protect him in the minor league phase.
Yeah.
Or that's my guy. I don't until he has an ERA over 10 in AAA. That's my guy. Yeah, Pham is the other one that I'm iffy on because I do agree, like Bob said earlier, when he got to AAA, and granted, he had the forearm strain. Right, and missed a lot of time last year. We didn't think he was going to come back. He told us, "I'm coming back. Don't worry." But it was a long time before he finally came back. So you don't know exactly how healthy, how good he was feeling when he finally got to AAA at the end of the year. And it was only like 3 innings or something, 4 innings. I don't know what it was, but the pitch data actually looks surprisingly good. I don't know. He's got the length. He can give you 5, 6, 7 innings. He's done that in the past. I lean towards no, but I could also see a situation where you maybe protect him just in case and then potentially DFA him. But I really liked that pitch data, man. 20 plus inches of induced vertical break on the fastball. Like, he's got some real stuff.
Yeah. We knew he was like a really solid, good pitcher, but yeah, the data was certainly eye-opening for me.
And let's go to this question now from Vivek. Will anyone jump on Reed Trimble? Now, everything I just said about Carter Balmer a moment ago would apply to Reed Trimble as a position player. Orioles drafted him in 2021 to a lot of hype, but the problem was that over the next 3 seasons, he struggled to stay on the field. And although he did miss some time with an injury in 2025, he managed to put together what was the the closest to a full season he's had at any point in his professional career, and very good numbers across the board, primarily at AA Chesapeake and AAA Norfolk, hitting 259s and 827 OPS, 17 home runs, and 21 stolen bases in as many attempts. And by the way, I keep track of this, and I hope you're keeping track of it too. Reed Trimble in 5 professional seasons is 61 for 61 in stolen base attempts. Some of the other attributes he has: good defensive versatility. He's played all over the outfield. The scouting reports we had heard coming out of the draft, though, were that he is a guy that they could possibly try on the infield at some point. We haven't really seen that yet, possibly because of the injuries, but it's always something that could be an option with Trimble. So what do you guys think with Trimble? Because we talked about this a little bit towards the end of the season, where it felt like if the Orioles were going to protect an outfielder, it was kind of between Fabian and Trimble. I think Fabian's case might still be a little bit stronger, but Trimble did a lot to close the gap. So where do you guys see him at this point?
To take the question very literally, please nobody jump on Reed Trimble. He's likely to miss another 3 or 4 months. But yeah, I think he's a very very underrated prospect in the system, even by us, by me. Like, I think when he's on the field, especially this season, he was pretty good. He can do pretty much everything. He's older than Judd Fabian, I think, which is kind of shocking, but I kind of hope he gets picked because I do think he could be pretty solid for a team. Yes, like the Angels, like the Rockies, one of these bad teams. I feel like he could surprise some people and stick. But yeah, I like the guy. I think he's a little bit buried in this organization between the outfield prospects in the upper levels and the minors. So I just hope he gets a shot. Whether it's I think Fabian has a better shot of being protected by the Orioles, but I'd love to see him get a chance somewhere.
Yeah, I initially want to say it feels like a lot of the same conversation you had about Hudson Haskin last year. And people were like, you got to protect Hudson Haskin. And I was like, you don't need to protect Hudson Haskin. You're going to be okay. And he didn't get picked. Same thing with Reed Trimble. It's like it's speed, it's defense, it's a little pop. Although I feel like Hudson Haskin, as he continued to climb up the ladder, I feel like we saw less of that home run power. But Reed Trimble, you're seeing more of it. Both have the extensive injury histories. I think Reed's is probably even a little bit more extreme, but I mean, Trimble was drafted 65th overall in that 2021 draft. It was like, what, 2 years ago? I'm pretty sure I am on record in a previous episode, like a preseason episode, maybe a prediction one, saying that Reed Trimble would be a top 10 prospect in the organization. That is clearly is never going to come true at this point. But, that's the type of prospect that he was. And that's how his skill set, how loudly his skill set can be. I think it's kind of tough to see a team jumping on him. Although, like, you look at his AAA data, he hits the ball hard. You talk about like max EVs is almost 112 miles per hour. He barrels the ball very well. He makes pretty decent contact in the zone. Not a terrible chaser. Not a ton of whiff. There is whiff in his game, but not a ton. It's an interesting conversation, but I think you can leave him unprotected and he sticks around as good AAA depth.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards unprotecting him too, or leaving him unprotected as well, because as good as last year was, it was still under 100 games, and we've yet to see anything close to a full healthy season. With that said, it's clearly an intriguing mix of tools, so someone could take a flyer. And now we'll go into our last question of the night, and this is where we're going to predict what the Orioles do. To this point, we've kind of talked about our personal preferences for players that we would like to see the Orioles protect, but let's predict now. How many more players are they going to add, and who will they be? Bob, I will start with you.
Let's see. It's just the surprise one that we think we're gonna.
Everybody.
Oh, just okay. Recapping. Okay, all right. I'll say Fabian, Westberg, Ramon Gomez. And I'll say I'll give Ballmer on there too. So those will be my 4.
I said I had my 3 that I named, but I keep going back to Zach's initial question of could that be it? Could we have seen it all? And I've been thinking about that a lot ever since. But I would say my final prediction is Cameron Weston. I'm gonna change it up, and I'm just gonna say 1, and Cameron Weston will be the only one.
I'm going to go with 2, and I'm going to go with Cameron Foster and Cameron Weston. So they had 1 reliever, 1 starting pitcher option. That leaves probably Fabian and Ballmer at the top of the class of players left unprotected, but we'll see.
Do you
And for
want
that does. Oh, God.
I was gonna say, do we want to make a go on the record with a claim with a dark horse pick? Who was the guy, the reliever, and then he went to the Arizona Fall League? He ended up going to the Padres. I forget the guy's name. They protected him from the Rule 5 draft too.
Oh yeah, Logan Gillespie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was do we want to go on record with a Logan Gillespie?
Yeah, let's
selection?
do that.
Then I'm gonna throw mine on and say Trey Sprite as my extreme dark horse pick.
I will say Yaki Rivera.
I'm going to agree with Bob. I'll go with Yaki Rivera.
I like it.
We will see what happens between now and next week, and we'll recap whatever happens unless they decide to not protect anybody, in which case we have something else to talk about on next week's show. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, and Blue Sky. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member of our community today. You can join at the $3, $5, and $10 levels and have access to bonus coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, including our upcoming countdown of the top 50 prospects in the Orioles farm system. Each year, before we unveil our top 50 in a full-length episode, typically around mid-February, we have a daily countdown over at Patreon, starting at prospect number 50 and going all the way up to number 1. And, of course, if a player who's inside of our top 50 is traded at any point, or multiple players are, you get bonus shows. So be sure to check that out. That's going to be starting on Patreon in a few weeks. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.